Well, I was quite interested and excited about it, actually. I think particularly, obviously we've done the whole lot now. So, I mean, the earlier albums, there's so much you can do to them. I said we did some of these albums in a very short period of time, and we were very rushed when it came to the mixing stage, and things just got, were not done satisfactorily, really, because you didn't have the time. So for a start, you can go back to these things, and you could even just remixing them in stereo would change, make them better. When we were doing these remixes, though, we took as our kind of brief that it shouldn't change them. They shouldn't really change. They should sound like they did, but just better. So you don't want people to come in here and say, oh, that's completely different. You just want people to hear it and think, God, that sounds great, but it still sounds like the song I know. So we're not trying to change balance or anything particularly. You might obviously with 5.1, because you can position things all round. You can hear things you didn't hear before necessarily. So you just got to make certain you get that sort of the effect right. There are moments when you do gimmicky things, like you put a voice out the back, things like that. But you try to keep those a little bit for shock value and things, And there are other things you put out the back. I mean, some of the percussive things sound really nice just coming out of a sort of strange area. But the resultant mix shouldn't change too much. Now, I've been quite closely involved in this all the way through, actually. I mean, Nick Davis has been the man who's done it, who's been our most recent engineer-producer. And he's been kind of doing the bulk of the work. But I've come in at the end of every song, either sort of, depending on when, sometimes earlier, depending a little bit on the song and how he feels about it. And then we'll kind of try to think about the whole group, not just about the keyboards. Obviously, put the keyboards a bit louder,
I have to be honest, the process has been very much Nick Davis running the show, and Tony Banks coming in, I think, to listen to every mix. I've been very lazy. I didn't come in very much. I must admit that. I hold my hand up, and I heard the mixes at the end. I mean, I obviously trust what they do, and obviously much more keyboards than there would have been. There should have been, because Tony's been here all the time. But allowing for that, no, I think it's been much more their baby, really. I haven't been that involved, apart from listening and okaying and making a few comments. But I think it's Nick's managed to improve the sounds and the tracks without spoiling them, and I think the fans will find this actually. If you like, the trouble is, if you like the old versions and you kind of change it too much, you've lost something. You can't go to hell with that, start again. You've got to pay homage to the old sound and the old mixes, and I think Nick's done it very well. I think.
I just really enjoyed it all. Really, I just found that you'd hear things on these songs you couldn't remember really, and then you go back to the original. They are sort of there, but not as loud as you might want it. And backing harmonies, you can just get everything just sort of to sound so nice. And even when you go back and then make a stereo out of that new 5.1 mix, just about every case it sounds better than the original, just because you've had the time to do it. Certainly everything up to and including Duke, that's the case, I think. The albums after that, the technology being better and everything, it's less of a change. But I think particularly the albums, the albums within this grouping, the 5 albums we're talking about here, particularly the first 4 of those, I think, just changed so much. Because what's on tape, particularly on albums like Wyndham Wuthering and Duke, is really good, I think, and this just really brings it out now.
My thoughts were, I could argue about every bass drum beat or every lick, but what's the point? That's just going to hold it up. That it happens is more important than what it's like. As it happens, when I heard the first of these mixes, I was absolutely thrilled with how good they sounded.
What we didn't want to do is to suddenly make it all contemporary 2006 kind of sounding, The idea is to try and keep the character, so it still sounds, if it's a 1976 album, it still sounds like 1976. But you make it sound, good within that kind of parameter.
The new stereo mix, I think, is probably the definitive mix. And that's almost, to me, as important as a 5.1. It's a different sort of thing, but I think it's he's done it very well. I think he hasn't changed. To be honest, from Hugh Abercab onwards, I would say there's less change because I think our recording got better. But in these early albums, I think there's much room for improvement. And I think he's done the balance very nicely, I think.
When I've listened to the bits and pieces of them, I can hear that they've benefited from being brought into this century.